We're here with Leslie Smith after the Professional Fighters Association meeting that we had here, the press conference. Leslie, people were a little bit surprised to see you here. Not that many people expected you here. Tell us, what was the thought process behind coming here, sort of sitting front row, showing your face, asking some questions, really getting amongst it?
The whole point of me being here is to learn as much as I possibly can. We're at a point right now where the change is inevitable. There have been a lot of people talking for a long time about fighters and fighters' rights and their benefits and the way that they're treated and how much money, everything about being a fighter as an employee or an independent contractor, whichever way, about how fighters get treated. And so, I've been very vocal about the MMAFA in support of them, and then I've already pledged my support to the Fighters Association, and I think it's very important, if I'm going to be running around doing that, if I want to avoid becoming a pawn for any of these groups, that I need to be as well informed as I possibly can, and not only beyond being a pawn seeking to avoid that, I also want to be able to help my fellow fighters by showing them that I can be here and that I haven't gotten kicked out. And that's a really big deal. You asked why I sat in the front row. I feel like it's very important that people see me, because I think that when people do see me, that they'll say, oh, if she can do it, we can do it too. And I think that's the most important thing right now, because we have all the public support, we have all the support of the other sports teams, we've got huge companies are behind us. It's just about the fighters stepping forward and embracing the opportunity to fight for themselves. They fight for everyone all the rest of the time. We fight for our teammates, we fight for our coaches, we fight for our families and our friends, and so this is our chance to fight for ourselves. And I figure the more visible that I am, then the more that it's going to inspire people to know that they can do anything I can do.
You said that you already pledged your allegiance to the PFA. In what way have you done that?
On Twitter, where everything important happens.
So it's interesting that you mentioned that you want to show the other fighters that you don't have to be afraid, the other UFC fighters, and nothing negative will happen to you. Has the UFC spoken to you at all about not being a part of this, about not supporting this? Have you had any negative communication from the UFC about it, or have you felt any implications or anything after you pledged your support for the organization?
The UFC has always treated me really, really, really well, and they have continued to do so, even as I have been standing up for the fighters. I think that a very significant reason for that is because I don't hate the UFC, and I'm not bashing the UFC, and I am extremely happy fighting for the UFC, and I'd like to continue to do so. I don't want to destroy the UFC. I want it to improve and get better, and they've done a great job as a business, an amazing job. They've gotten us to this point where we're the fastest growing sport, but the next step is that instead of just the business aspect growing, is that the whole thing needs to grow. And so the fighters, we need to grow, and we need to grow the care that the fighters are given, and that's only going to lead to the whole sport doing better, and that is going to lead to the UFC doing better. So I'm still being a company woman, standing right here and being part of this Fighters Association and saying I'm all about everything for the fighters. I'm still being a company woman, because it's going to make everything better for the whole company.
When people saw you support the situation, the organization, a lot of fans are saying, oh, Leslie's not going to be around tomorrow. Leslie's going to be released soon. Leslie's not going to have another fight in the UFC. Was that something that you thought about in the back of your mind before you chose this decision? And how hard was it for you to say, no, I'm going to do this? Because you're coming off possibly one of the most promoted fights of your career. A lot of fans are getting to know you. Were you afraid that the UFC would release you and you'd sort of lose all that in support of this?
There's always a fear every time that I speak in favor of the union, in favor of the fighters organizing, that there's going to be some kind of a retaliation. But at the end of the day, if I want to go to sleep and know that I've lived my day to the maximum amount of integrity that I can, then I know that I need to do this. And so even though I get scared and I get sweaty palms and my mouth gets dry and my heartbeat is kind of racing each time that I've gotten a phone call about, hey, will you sign this petition, or will you tweet about this, or will you be vocal about this? And I've said yes. part of that is a slight worry that I'm being a pawn, and I think that maybe that's affecting some of the other fighters as well, because I haven't studied all this in college. I don't have a degree in any of these departments, and I haven't spent time working in litigation cases or anything like that, and so I'm learning as I go about everything that's going on, and so that's another driving force to me being so vocal, is that I know this needs to happen and I don't want to be anyone else's pawn, and so education is the most important thing, and so I'm here to learn as much as possible.
You literally being the only UFC fighter that attended this press conference, it does send a big message, and your message is obviously to the fighters to say, look, you guys don't have to be afraid. Since you pledging your allegiance to the PFA, have you felt the positives of that? Have you felt other fighters come out? Has anyone contacted you?
Well, okay. The positives that I've felt since doing all this, talking about it, tweeting about it, being here right now, the UFC actually sent me to a doctor today, and I got the tumor removed from my stomach that I talked about in a video with the MMAFA. It's gone. I can show you guys the video if you want. So that's very exciting, and that's wonderful. That wouldn't have happened without being vocal and without being here. I think that your question was more about, have other fighters been approaching me and saying, okay, we're in, we're going to do it if you are. And the answer is no. They haven't said, okay, you're doing it, so we're going to do it too. But they have said, hey, good job and thank you. And we really appreciate you doing what you're doing. And I mean, they do say, it's a pretty courageous thing, because they're not doing it themselves, and that's huge. That's a big deal. It's wonderful to hear that. That's not the reason I'm doing it, is for the pats on the back. I'm doing it so they will step up onto the platform with me. But everything takes steps, and I'm willing to just keep going forward. It's one step after another.
Well, Matt Mitran said it's going to take a lot of trust for fighters to come forward and join Jeff. In your opinion, what do you think of Jeff? What do you think of what he said here? How do you pick him up as a person? And also, what do you think he can do to get the fighters to trust him more? Is there any kind of idea in your head, anything he can say, anything that he can do to make them sort of step forward?
That's a great question. I think that one of the steps that's going to make fighters more eager to trust Jeff Borris and the Professional Fighters Association and put themselves out there is going to be more fighters. Fighters live a very unique lifestyle, and there's bonds that we form on the mat and an understanding that we have of other people who've stepped inside of the cage that we just don't share with everybody else. And so getting more fighters is a big deal, and I think that as Jeff said today, I think he's an absolute professional. I think he's very, very good at what he does, and I have no doubt that if we empower him, that he will be able to fulfill the things that he's saying that he will. I think that I was going somewhere with that. Where was I going? I think that it's important that that the more fighters step in, and that's one of the things that the MMAFA has going for it, is all the fighters. And so the number one way that the Professional Fighters Association, in my opinion, can gain the trust of the fighters right now is by getting the retired fighters and the already organized fighters that are part of the MMAFA on their side. We don't need the infighting, and they've both said that they are not competition. And so to see them working together, and then to have all the fighters that are already backing the MMAFA come out and back the Professional Fighters Association as well, I think that would make a big difference for a lot of people.
Well, we're excited to see what happens in the future. Leslie, thanks so much for your time.
Hey, thank you.